Hey everyone, it's July 7th, 2017, and this is your episode 103 of At Percussion. I'm your host, Casey Cangelosi, and with me as usual are Laurel Black.
Hi.
And Megan Arns. How's it going?
Hello, it's good. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you. How are those new cats?
They're good. Just found out today that I do not have a boy and a girl cat. I have two girl cats. So,
very easy
accepting name changes for Louie.
We also have Ben Charles.
Hey there.
Ben, are you getting ready for jury duty?
Oh my god, I got assigned to jury duty and I don't want to do it.
I did it once. I got dismissed. And what I thought was so interesting is when they're prepping you for the process, one of the first things you do is or at least when I did it, they sat us down and they showed us like an instructional video on what you're about to do in the process. And so much of the video was, what does it mean if I'm not selected? What did I do wrong? And what does it mean about me
if I'm taking notes on that part?
It was the weirdest thing, like as if people would get, I don't know, depressed or upset that they weren't selected, whereas I would think most people are very happy to not have to do it. Alli, have you ever done jury duty?
I have. I was also dismissed. But my husband did it, and he was dismissed, and he felt really bad about it. He felt rejected. I think all you have to do, Ben, is tell them that you believe that the system is racist and rigged against people of color, and then they won't mind.
I was thinking about wearing black nail polish and lipstick also.
I think the PhD will get you out more than anything.
Excellent.
Let's see. So, you guys, our guest today is the vice principal at Northwest Middle School in Salt Lake City, Utah. She's worked in public education for 18 years and has taught debate, history, English, and has been an instructional teaching coach. She has an EDD in educational leadership and policy. And when I was 12 years old or so, I stole her Guns N' Roses cassette tape, and she literally beat the hell out of me. So she's also my big sister, Alli Martin. How's it going?
Hi, good.
So it's an unusual circumstance to call a family member to the podcast and a vice principal, but I thought, no, this is so good. It's so relevant to have Alli here because there was that little that little news item that was floating around Facebook and has made a lot of the rounds in our music ed circles. So we'll get to that a little later, but I thought we should start with something a little lighter for Alli, and she got a lot of Facebook questions. So Megan, do you have a Facebook question for Alli there?
Sure. This Facebook question comes from Ben Charles. It says, why didn't you put a pillow over Casey's head? That's a chance. Okay, just kidding. This question is from
no, it's a good question, though.
From our regular sub, Brandon Arvay. And Brandon's asking, it appears as though student success is now outsourced completely to teachers, with parents putting the responsibility on teachers to teach student behavior management and problem solving, and students mandating that teachers prove the educational value of school subjects. What skills do modern educators need to handle this paradigm shift?
Whoa.
This is a really meaty question, and I'm glad that it came up first on Facebook because it really is something that I think we need to talk about more. So in preparing for this, I went ahead and checked my facts to make sure that I would be able to answer this appropriately. I think that the question says that it appears as though student success is outsourced. And I think that that's really the key term there is appears, because it's not true that student success is completely outsourced, but it does appear that way. And I think that one of the reasons why is because the demographics of our country are changing. And for the first time now, more than 50% of public school students are people of color in the United States, and more than 50% of public school students live in poverty. And when you have students who don't look like their teachers, then it's really hard for those students and their families to engage with teachers the way that a lot of us are used to working within our public school system, right? So I see teachers who look like me, and then I can relate to them and I kind of see them as an ally. Whereas my students look at me and I look like their landlord, or I look like the person who is threatening to turn their parents into immigration, or, like any sort of other like person that they've had a negative interaction with.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, then parents tend to step away a little bit from the educational system. Students tend to become a little bit more confrontational with their teachers. And I think that you have this issue where teachers need to know how to be culturally competent in order to be effective teachers. And that's not something that we focus on in our pre-service programs a lot.
Do you see that changing at all?
I do. In Salt Lake, the University of Utah has an Urban Education Institute, which focuses a lot on teaching in like city environments. And I think that other schools are making similar progress, but I'm not sure that that's like the case across the board. And I think that where we're always going to have primarily, at least for now, like white middle-class teachers, then they're always going to be suffering from kind of looking like somebody other than their students. And that's going to kind of create some animosity and some mistrust.
Sure.
Man, that never even occurred to me that that could be, wow, how do you even tackle that?
Well, so cultural competency it's a technique, and it's a skill that teachers can learn. And part of it just has to do with understanding like those kinds of facts, right? That when you don't look like somebody else, then it's harder to relate to that person.
If I could interject into that really quickly.
Go ahead, please.
My mother taught in inner city Richmond, predominantly African-American students. And there was one morning when they were trying to get the students to clean up from breakfast, and she said something about, you people need to get up and put your trays away or something like that. And a parent overheard it, and my mom is like not at all racist and didn't mean it in any sort of racial way, but the parent took it as my mom, the white lady, saying, you people, as in you black people, need to do this, and was not happy and told the principal, and my mom got called into the principal's office, and it was fine. Like, obviously my mom didn't mean anything like it, but it's one of those things like you're talking about when the teacher doesn't look like the students, things like that can come up that really can set off fires. So, sorry.
No, that's a perfect example. I think people, that when you don't look at the world through that lens, it's really hard to understand that sometimes innocent actions can be taken as aggressive actions. And that's part of that cultural competency, is teaching teachers how to see those things.
Yeah.
Wow. Ben, what do you have there as a little follow-up?
Yeah, so I had a follow-up. One thing that Brandon touched on in his question, it wasn't his question, but he said something about teachers need to prove the educational value of school subjects. And this is a huge topic right now. And if you've even followed any politics, you've heard of S.T.E.M education, which stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there's another trend that some people are sort of floating the idea of S.T.E.M, which is integrating arts into the word STEM for an A. And when I was a music education major, we talked about this in one of my classes, and the teacher was telling us you need to have all this data on how studying music can increase your math test scores and how it's good for analytical thinking and blah, 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 blah. And someone sort of got offended by all this and just said, can't we study music because it's worth studying music? Why do we have to study music because it's good for math? Is that a valid point to bring up to educational administrators, or do they really want to see how it will integrate into the STEM curriculum and make math scores better?
I think it's an incredibly valid point to bring up. Unfortunately, I think depending on who your administrator is, it may or may not be a wise point to bring up, especially for like a new teacher. That's something that I completely agree with the idea that we should be teaching arts because arts are important and not because they'll increase math test scores or, science test scores. As an English teacher, I had similar arguments where we would talk about like there's value in reading literature. It's not just because of the testing, right? That's involved in that. And the same thing with math or with music, sorry. The other thing I think that's really important is that, again, going back to like our students being, over half of them are people of color and over half of them live in poverty. think about who they see as successful who also look like them, right? I mean, if I am a young Black kid with a single mom living in poverty, who do I know who has made it in the world? Is it going to be a scientist or a mathematician, or is it going to be a musician? Right? Like, like telling kids that they need to study STEM because that's where they're going to get a job is not necessarily true. I mean, there are a lot of really successful musicians out there. There are a lot of really successful artists, and the world needs more of them. And if we say that the only purpose in education is getting a job that will further like our business interests, then are we really valuing our students as individuals, or are we just valuing them as, part of our industry, right? And that's been a big problem in our country for a long time, especially with kids who match the demographics of the kids that we're teaching.
Yeah, what do you got, Ben?
Yeah, and then as a little follow-up, just a statement, my stepfather was a military brat, so he lived and studied all over the world. And part of his education was in, I think it was Austria, but it could have been Germany. But German schools are renowned for being some of the best schools in the world, as are Japanese schools. And over there, they do study arts in school. And he said that the whole premise is that you're not supposed to, it's exactly what Alli just said, you're not supposed to just become an engineer. You're supposed to develop a greater understanding and appreciation of the world around you. And the kind of ironic thing about this is it seems like most technology companies, in particular Apple and Google, are very interested in people that aren't just STEM students, are very interested in people that have a broader world perspective. So I think it's like an ironic sort of failure in education to realize that the careers we're trying to prepare these people for by cutting out the arts actually want the arts in the curriculum. So
absolutely. Also, I think it's like over 30% of jobs that people have currently didn't exist like 15 years ago. So the idea that I can prepare any one of my students for a career is flawed, because I don't even know what jobs they're going to be available to them.
It's a good point.
Which simply shows it's not so much about the material we choose to teach. It's just we need stuff that is conveyed well, and just teaching them to utilize information, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you have that really inspiring science teacher or a really inspiring music teacher. The point is the activity being done really well, right? Is that safe to say?
Absolutely. And creativity, right? Teaching kids to be creative is going to cause all sorts of benefits for industry and the world in general.
Yeah, cool. Wow, man. Well, you guys, the reason I really decided that we should have Alli on, like I mentioned earlier, was this little news item I bumped into. And like I might have said already a little, this teacher at a place called Washington Middle had, let's see. So there's this video going around from a district school board meeting where teacher Kirsten Westcott, she's worked there for 9 years, and she says that she wanted to work with at-risk youth and that it was her calling in life. She says the last 5 years have headed in a downward spiral at their school, and that her colleagues, and many of her students fear for their safety every day. She's speaking on behalf of her fellow colleagues and students in front of the school board, and I have a lot of it here, but I just need to read some of it to you guys to get us all on the same page in a sense of what she says. So she says, in addition to verbal abuse, the people at Washington are getting injured more than ever. Just a couple of weeks ago, a teacher was taken away in an ambulance with a bleeding head wound caused by a fight amongst 3 students. Another teacher was physically attacked by students trying to set off a deadly allergic reaction on purpose, causing her throat to close and her to struggle to breathe. She goes on to describe, I know, it's crazy. This is totally depressing. She goes on to describe other less dangerous, though criminal incidents. And she says all of these occurred in the month of May. Fires set, weapons brought in, drugs sold and used. She describes a shooting threat and asks, is it going to take someone getting killed for you, the school board, to finally take drastic action that is needed? She says, Our district says it values health and wellness, but our work environment has become so toxic that it is literally making us sick. I have numerous colleagues out on extended leave due to stress. It is a vicious cycle because we cannot get substitute teachers to come to our building, so every single day we are asked to cover classes of fellow colleagues who are out. This perpetuates the cycle because we are then thrown into classrooms with kids we don't know, sometimes with no lesson plans or even rosters. Given no support, then our preparation time is taken away from our own classes. This compounds the stress and makes us even sicker. One of my colleagues has headaches every single day and is taking medication. Another wakes up in the night in cold sweats every week and has had nightmares 4 days after being threatened by an aggressive student. Another wakes up every single Sunday night around 2 a.m. and throws up in anticipation of the work week starting. She goes on to describe the commonality of the teacher's anxiety and how they are showing symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. She describes an 8th grader who was once quiet, calm, and well-behaved 2 years ago while in her 6th grade class. Now, years later, she finds him screaming at a staff member in the office about his cell phone being taken away. When he saw me, she says, with my jaw open in awe of his actions, he began to cry instead of scream because he knows he is a different person than that. He has learned to be aggressive over the years in this environment. There's some more there, but I should probably stop there and let Alli let us know what we should be preparing our music ed students for.
Certainly, And listening to the video, I would say that I think that that's a pretty extreme situation that teacher is in. I could relate. I'm not going to lie. Like, the school that I'm at has some similar problems. And so it's certainly not something that I think that it paints a realistic picture, unfortunately. A term that's coming up a lot in education is ACEs and Trauma Informed Instructional Practices. I don't know if you're familiar with either one of those.
No.
So ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and it's a term that psychologists came up with to kind of help figure out like how much trauma impacts students. And what they do is they came up with 8 initial ACEs that students might experience. And then what you do is you kind of count them, and the more ACEs that you have, then the more trauma, you probably have experienced. So the 8 are substance abuse in the home, parental separation or divorce, mental illness in the home, witnessing domestic violence, a suicidal household member, death of a parent or another loved one, parental incarceration, or experience of abuse or neglect. So, our students are coming to us more and more with ACEs. That impacts them because one of the problems, especially with middle school, is they look big, but they act small. So you're dealing with children who might be your size or bigger, but who are behaving kind of like toddlers. And I think it's really important. One of the things that teachers have to keep in mind is that these kids, while it can be really scary when they're throwing a fit or when they're being violent, do not see themselves as powerful, and they do not see themselves as threats to you because you are the big, strong adult. So even when I am, a foot shorter than some of my students, I still in their mind have more power than they do. And so therefore they have a really hard time seeing how they could possibly threaten me or how they could possibly scare me. And I've been scared by students before. It happens. I'm not being an assistant principal. You really have to get in there and break up fights. And I've been injured. I've been punched this year for the first time in my life.
Wow.
I never punched you?
Yeah, you never punched me. I didn't.
Oh, that can't be right. I'll bring in a third party later on that. I'm not sure about that.
We'll fact check the podcast.
That's crazy though, Alli. What happened after you got punched?
What happened immediately after is that I had an asthma attack because I am that strong and in shape. What happened is a student was losing it. She was completely out of control. She didn't even know that she punched me.
Wow.
A couple of days later when we talked about it, she started crying when she found out that she had punched me. because she didn't intend it. But she was losing her mind, and she had to be restrained. Another assistant principal actually was restraining her, and I was trying to help. And we eventually had to ring the school bell to get kids back to class to try to break the situation up. But if I can promote a book I didn't write it,
Please.
But there's a great book out there that I found really helpful called Fostering Resilient Learners. And it's by Kristen Sewers, I think, and Pete Hall. But this has been a great text, and I wish that teachers in preparation courses would read it. It's new. I don't think that it's really made its way into like regular classes yet. But one of the things that they talk about is that teachers have to wear what they call cement shoes. And I love this metaphor because what it's saying is, when you are working with students who have experienced trauma, it's like standing in the ocean and you're getting, moved by these waves, and you can stand there for a couple of minutes and maybe withstand it. But after a little while, you're going to start getting pushed from side to side by the waves. And the students are, the trauma that they bring to schools is really powerful, and it's really hard to withstand that unless you can develop in yourself cement shoes to stand strong and to be the stable, steady presence in those students' lives. So when they're freaking out, you aren't being impacted by it, and you're standing there stable and emotionally strong, being able to look at them and say, I can understand that you need a minute right now. I'm going to let you go calm down, or I'm going to step away from the situation and come back when you're ready to talk. Because what happens is a lot of times these kids start, and then the teacher will react, and then it escalates. And so learning how to not react and how to weather the storm of our students' emotions is probably the most important thing. And when you combine that with cultural competency, realizing that sometimes the way that you talk to a kid or the way that you interact with them can trigger them. And then realizing that sometimes you're going to have to back away from that situation and let them go into we have a quiet room in my school. It's a place where kids can just go and if they need to sleep, they can sleep. If they need to punch something, they can punch something. If they need to just sit in a dark area and cry, they can sit in a dark area and cry. And we use that room a lot because the more and more that we put them on display, the more and more that behavior escalates and it becomes more and more dangerous.
What do you call that room? Because it sounds like a timeout corner.
Yeah, and is that
something.
Is that they ask to go in there or you tell them to go in there?
We call it our cool down room. We have an elementary school that feeds into us that every teacher has a cool down corner. Some of them actually create it under their desk, and they put a little dog bed in there because the kids are small and they can go in there and close the curtain and just kind of be on their own, like a little tent. But sometimes we put them in there, and sometimes they choose to go in there. So usually the first time a kid is just freaking out, they don't know what to do. And so I say, would you like to sit in the quiet room? Or I say, I think you need to go into the quiet room, and I'll put them in there. And usually after they've been in there once, they will ask, they'll say, I need to go calm down. Dr. Martin, I can't be in this class anymore. I got to go to the quiet room, and we'll let them go sit in there. And it helps.
That's nice that they're allowed to choose to go themselves as well, rather than waiting for the reprimand when they already know that that's the solution.
The only problem I can see with that is kids might abuse it, I have a test, I need to go in the quiet room. Do you have some sort of system in place for that?
So we don't have a system. We try to be really aware of how often it's being used by kids. And sometimes you have to also think about, okay, so if this kid is using this as a way to get out of taking a test, is forcing them to take the test going to be the best thing for them or for the other kids in the room anyway, right? So perhaps this kid needs to be in an environment where they can take a test on their own and not be in front of other people, especially in middle school age. They might be thinking that everybody in the room's looking at them and noticing that they're only on question 6 when everybody else is on question 26. And so they might need to take that test after school or during the teacher's prep period or something so that they can be alone and focus on it. And so that's kind of one of those things a lot of teachers push back on. They think that these things get abused, that we're kind of pampering these kids. But at the same time, we have to think about, like, if a kid is coming to you and they don't sleep at night because there's arguing in their house all night long, or they have anxiety from having experienced abuse or witnessing abuse, we can't just force them to tough it out. You know, what happens when we do that is what this teacher described in Green Bay. And that's where we have to take a step back and say, you know, their academics can only come after we take care of their emotions. You know, like Maslow's hierarchy, like we have to make sure that they feel safe and that they feel secure before we can expect them to understand geometry.
Yeah, I really like the book you mentioned, Alli. I think I might read it, in the whole cement shoes thing, and a sort of like compassionate detachment, because it's not unemotional saying, like, you might need a second, but it's actually a great show of sensitivity to be able to understand what might trigger someone. Because I would bet that a lot of those who act out probably have very reactionary familial relationships outside of school.
Yeah, I love that phrase that you just coined, compassionate detachment.
Thank you.
That's exactly what we need.
Well, you know, back to this woman's school board hearing, it's really nice to hear you say this seems like a rare situation. And I know we've probably all been, Laurel, Megan, we've all been in public schools before, of course, doing master classes or, and I've certainly never seen anything, that scary, but I also know it is out there. When you, Alli, are looking at teachers, when you're looking at teachers to hire, what are some of the ways you can detect if a potential teacher is good at dealing with this scarier stuff we're talking about? You know,
that's something that we have been struggling with. And if anybody knows the answer to that, I would love to hear it. One of the things that we look for is we look for people who have experience in schools like ours. So people who have done student teaching or volunteer work in Title I schools, which are schools that are high poverty, or maybe grew up in our community. We always like to try to find people who live in our community. Another thing that we sometimes do is we try to kind of give the teachers scenarios where, like, imagine this happens in your classroom. You have a student who stands up in the middle of class and swears at you and then walks out. How do you handle that? And kind of try to gauge their reaction. It's amazing how many times teachers are like, oh yeah, that happened to me like a couple weeks ago and here's what I did, versus teachers who are like, I can't even imagine something like that occurring in my room. Those are good ways to kind of feel people out. But it's surprising because sometimes the most timid, like sweet looking teacher will be the best one to manage those kinds of situations. And other times, you know, they're not going to be able to hang, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah, interesting. It's funny because I know I finished school, I learned all this, you know, super heavy musical concepts, and then you go out in the world and the job you might get is utilizing maybe a few steps back of those musical concepts that you're teaching. And Ben and Megan, I don't know if you experienced this, but I know when I was first applying for jobs, I thought, okay, the thing I have to show these people trying to hire someone is like how musically competent I am. I am so musically competent.
Like, how can you recruit?
I know. And then the questions are much more, you know, if they're even talking to you, they know you're musically competent. That's not in question. What they now want to know is, will you be a good colleague, and what will you be like to work with for the rest of their careers? And yeah, that's a harder thing to show for sure. Hey,
can you connect with the students? And yeah, for sure.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So speaking of this cool down room, Laurel, I think that kind of segues into what you're talking about a little bit.
Yeah. So if your topic is kind of a shadow side of teaching today, I think my topic is very much on the lighter side. It's an interview in one of my favorite magazines that I often present from, Mindful Magazine. The single-page interview is called A Lesson in Unconventional Love, and it's by William Hogan. The woman he's interviewing is named Caverly Morgan. She's one of the pioneers who wants to make mindfulness a recognized discipline in public education. As the founder and executive director of the nonprofit Peace in Schools, she aims to change how teenagers cope with stress, negative thinking, and difficult emotions. So what she did after she developed that nonprofit, she moved to Portland, Oregon, and decided to offer an after-school program at one high school. After a few sessions, the principal there visited and said, I think what you're offering is something that can really benefit a much larger population of our students. And so they decided together to offer a class. One of the reasons being high schools in Portland, like those all over the country, struggle with teenage suicides. And that principal recognized, that the class she was offering focused on a form of well-being that he hadn't seen modeled in the school before. And so when they decided to offer a class during the day, they expected maybe 20 to 25 students to sign up, and it was offered at the same time as the 10th grade PE classes. So it was kind of in that vein of the curriculum, and they thought 20 to 25, that'll be a success. Over 300 signed up.
Wow.
Which I think is very telling if, these are high school students, a little older than the ones we were just talking about, but that type of self-observation as a teenager to say, I think this could benefit me. It really speaks to a need that is out there. In terms of the name Peace in Schools, so that's her whole nonprofit. And I should mention before I continue forward that one class, the 300 students, has now prompted her to teach 6 year-long courses of mindfulness and meditation in 6 different high schools in her particular district. So it has really become part of the larger student body's lives at this point. But awesome. Peace in Schools shows students that we all have the opportunity to experience really deep and lasting happiness and peace. And Caverly says, in my experience, mindfulness can pave the way to that kind of peace. And in our classroom, teens do mindful walking, eating, and sitting meditation and body scans, learning how to direct their attention to different parts of the body. Where do you carry stress? Where do you carry your tension? Those kinds of things. All of this happens with an environment that she calls CARE, C-A-R-E, which stands for confidentiality, acceptance, respect, and empathy. A container of trust is created, and it's out of that environment of trust and care that we deepen the experience of observing negative self-talk, discovering what it means to assess self-compassion, and unpacking how we get stuck in good-bad dichotomous thinking. And then lastly, before we open it up to everybody, last part of the interview, she's asked, what's the most important thing that teenagers in your classes learn? And she says, all teens are at risk. They're simply at risk in different ways. One thing we never do is talk at them. We're always engaged with them, and that's empowering for a teenager who may not be getting that in any other class. We help them express themselves, and their application of who they authentically are in the world could take a million different forms. So I find this particularly uplifting, and I gave Alli a heads up on this topic, and you said it was kind of like a hot issue right now in education, so I'm really interested to learn kind of how it's being discussed and what people think of incorporating some type of mindful, reflective meditation time or class, anything like that, into curriculums now in public schools.
So, I think kind of like the response to the trauma informed instruction and things like a cool down room or something like that is how do we preempt these emotional outbursts from our students, right? Like, how do we prevent that so that we don't need to use cool down rooms? And that's where a lot of educators are turning to mindfulness and meditation for their students. Along with that is kind of a focus on restorative justice and restorative practices, which means that we build communities in which we develop empathy and caring for each other so that then when there are breaks in trust and there are infractions within that community, we have a relationship to rebuild rather than trying to build it together. I'm sure that everybody here has experienced a time when you've been asked to apologize to somebody who you don't really care about to begin with. And you're like, well, I mean, sure, I'm sorry, whatever. But it's not like you've built a friendship over that. Versus if you've had a close friend, like Casey and I have fought as children, but I always loved him. And so when I was able to realize that I was hurting him, then my apology was sincere, and we were able to restore the relationship that we had. And that's part of this restorative practices. But it's hard to get kids to do that if they don't have mindfulness and they don't have, an understanding of their own bodies and their own emotions. We have a class at my school called Techniques for Tough Times, where we teach kids some mindfulness practices, and we also teach them mediation skills. And that's an incredibly popular class. Unfortunately, it's an elective class, and a lot of these types of courses are. So like at the school that you were talking about in Oregon, I'm not surprised that there are so many students interested in learning about this. Unfortunately, and this is kind of where the controversy comes, is in order to teach them about that, you're not teaching them something else. And the something else that you might not be teaching them is probably something that's tested and therefore mandatory.
Well, Alli, we've heard Dad for years talk about it. It seems like we don't, more is not the solution. Of course, I'm totally paraphrasing. I don't know if he's actually ever said those exact words, but I've always heard him say things like, the extracurricular activities are so important, and kids shouldn't have 7 classes a day. I mean, I remember being in school and just, after a few classes, I was I was fried. You're just going around fried, is more always the solution, even if it is this, calming, cool down type of hour. And Dad used to always say, those after school activities like sports and music, and they should be during regular school hours, and everyone should go home at a reasonable time. Like, everyone's lives are just a little too crazy, I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. I think when I look at my students' like math assignments, I think to myself, like, I don't remember any of this. I don't remember how to multiply fractions, and never once in my life have I had to know how to do that.
Right. And our dad's a math professor.
I've never been at the store.
Yeah.
Like, if only I could multiply these fractions, then I could get this home mortgage that I need or something.
Right.
And I think that we tend to like way oversell some of what we consider to be like core knowledge at the expense of maybe what I would call core humanity, right? Like building relationships, having students find like a safe place. I mean, music classes in particular are such an important safe space for kids, right? To feel accepted and to feel valued and to feel like they have important skills when they might spend a large part of their day feeling like they don't, right? And I especially feel for my kids who don't test well and therefore spend their day in a double block of math, a double block of English, a reading intervention class, and maybe like a science lab, and they never get to participate in music or a mindfulness class, or anything like that. And 8 hours a day of being told you're stupid, and then maybe going home to an environment where you don't feel a lot of love or support either, is not going to result in the kind of human that we want to have walking around as an adult.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah,
well, that's
so true.
Yeah, that's where my brain starts to go with everything that I know has to be taught for all the standardized tests. And like, as I think about it and I reflect on just the, like, particularly, public shootings in my recent memory, a lot of them are by really young people. And it just starts to make me wonder, like, you guys, I don't think that having biology and chemistry and then maybe anatomy and then biology too is like actually helping. I'm really not sure that it is. It almost seems that the world would be better if we said, no, everybody needs to have some form of art, something that helps them realize that they are not alone, and that the one thing they have to live with in the world the entire time they're alive is themselves. If you can't find a way to be at peace with yourself, biology isn't gonna help, I wouldn't think. I mean, it might help you with a little bit of drive, but I mean,
especially if you're not passionate about it.
Right, yeah, like how are you gonna have a healthy passion about something if you're not okay with yourself at the beginning of it?
All this makes me think of, like, do you guys know who probably the most famous failed painter of all time is?
Hitler.
Pius Chang.
Hitler.
Right.
Yeah, like, Hitler wanted to be an artist, and he wanted to paint, and like obviously he didn't have a great childhood. Like, there were, you know, family problems, especially with his father, and basically he was told, like, you're not any good at this, you'll never make a living with this, and then he went on to be the Hitler that we know. So yeah, I mean, it's like, I mean, I'm not saying that, you know, art can save the world, but in that case, if he had just been painting paintings, he probably wouldn't have done that other stuff. So, well,
and just to be clear, I mean, this goes back to what we said, I think just last episode about having meaning. In Laurel reported on that book, Finding Meaning. And I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be an art. You know, Laurel mentioned biology. I mean, you just need like passion, you know. And I think the thing we said last episode is, hey, if you have a passion, you're just lucky you like something. You know, how many people do you meet in our lives who they you know, they don't like what they do? You know, it's most people, you know.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, yeah, not to just sit here and advocate art only. I mean, they just, you know, they need something to be passionate about, of course.
No, well, I think it's like recognizing a tiny part of yourself. And in this way, I think it comes totally full circle to what Alli said at the very beginning of, like, if your teachers look like you, there's this automatic feeling that you could accomplish what they've accomplished, you know, but like in the arts, and there are fewer lines of color in the arts, it feels like. And yeah, it's just much easier to see, like, oh, that person's like me. I got it. And even, like, I remember being little, and I have this soft spot in my heart for Rhapsody in Blue. I think I've talked about this on the podcast. But, you know, like when I was going through a tough time in high school because girls are mean. And I would get home, and I had a little record player in a suitcase in my room, and I would put on my grandfather's 78 of Rhapsody in Blue with Bernstein conducting, and I would just, like, lay on the floor beside it and cry and get it out and then just go on. It was like 15 minutes of crying, and then I just felt like this says what I needed to say right now, and it was especially that chorale part in the middle. And then I just went on, and I know not everybody has that connection to music, but I feel like everybody can have that connection to something. Yeah. And yeah, just like Alli said, like, if a kid feels all day like, oh, you're stupid, you're not good at this, and, you know, you're not going to fit in because you don't test well. I didn't test well. I was really good at school, but I did not test well. And so I always felt very frustrated of, like, I know this stuff, but I can't read this quick enough to take the test in the time I'm supposed to take it.
And you don't fit in. You're wearing pajamas on the podcast right now.
That's awesome.
Alli, what were you going to say there?
I just wanted to point out also that I am not saying that we shouldn't force kids to learn math. Also, I just wanted to make it really clear, like, especially when we talk about kids who are living in poverty, it's important that we don't have lower expectations for them, or that we don't, you know, say that they don't need to have as high of standards as other kids. But I do think, like what Laurel just said is so important, like her example of how she was able to cope with the stress and the normal trauma that is involved in growing up is really, really important. And something that not all kids are able to get, right? And so we talk a lot in education about how we can help these kids. Like, they do need to know math, they do need to know science, they do need to know music, they do need to have to know art, they need to find a passion, and they need to be nice to each other, and all of these things that we're trying to do for them. But really, education, especially public schools, are merely a smaller version of society as a whole, right? So the problems that our kids bring to us and the problems that they experience are the same ones that our communities experience. And really, if we really want to solve this, then we have to start looking at other things like, this is why we need to raise the minimum wage. This is why our kids and their parents need access to health care. This is why, they need to be living in safe and secure housing, because until they have those things, they're never going to have a record player and a bedroom that they can lay down in and cry for 15 minutes and then move on, right? It's that buildup, that consistent buildup of stress that they experience that leads to these kinds of violent outbursts.
Wow.
So I just wanted to make sure that
I just not to get political on this, but that's one of the biggest reasons for food stamps, is because if a kid can't, not food stamps, free lunch programs, is because if a kid goes to school hungry and can't eat, he's going to be disruptive. Not only is he not going to learn, but the entire class isn't going to learn because the one kid is hungry, basically. And you can blame the parents for that, but the kid needs to eat to learn.
Right.
Wow. Megan, do you have a Facebook question there?
Yeah, this just kind of continues down the conversation we're having, but to ask it super directly, Adam Hopper asks, what are your thoughts on standardized testing and how it pertains to assessing student achievement?
I think it's probably going to be no surprise that I am not a fan of our major focus on testing. One of the things that really bothers me is just the way that we use the phrase student achievement, like as though a student is only achieving success, or they're only successful if they get high test scores or they get good grades. Student achievement should be such a broader term. Certainly, like it is an achievement if you can perform in front of an audience. It is an achievement if you can find a book to read that you love reading. It's an achievement for some kids to show up to school every single day, or even once a week, based on the world that they live in, right? And so to say that standardized testing tells us anything about student achievement, I think is a misuse of that word.
I'm sure, you're probably directly affected by this constantly, but do you have a lot of pressure in your school district, funding for or pressure to keep scores up? And I'm assuming you probably have to deal with that to some degree.
Yeah, certainly our Title I funding is tied to our test scores. The school that I'm at is considered a turnaround school. So we've been through a turnaround process where that was focused primarily on raising our test scores. I think one of the benefits, at least, of the way that the world functions right now is these test scores are highly unreliable, and they're it's widely acknowledged that they're unreliable. The test that Utah adopted, the SAGE test, has been changed every 3 years since its adoption, and we're once again looking at changing it. So therefore, it's really hard to measure, because the first year that you give it's invalid. The second year is considered, still part of that pilot, right? And then we give it and the scores count, and then they change it again.
Yeah.
So some of those, unlike some other states, we at least haven't felt some of the repercussions of the focus on test scores. But if anybody is feeling passionate about this, there is a wonderful movement in Seattle taking place right now. And I'm just trying to... There's a website called I Am an Educator that talks about the problems that the state of Washington and Seattle educators are having on dealing with the pressures of test scores.
Hey, Alan Lang on Facebook has kind of an open-ended question, which maybe you answered already, but I'll give you a chance if there's something else you wanted to say, just about if there was something you could change to make sure kids are learning more and just make your school run better. What would that be?
I think trauma informed instruction is definitely something that we need a lot more practice with and a lot more engagement on. The thing that we haven't talked about on this podcast yet, which is a huge passion of mine, Casey, is creating inclusive schools. and schools where all students see themselves represented in their curriculum, but particularly LGBTQ students tend to be very isolated in their schools, and they tend to be nearly invisible in school curriculum. So making sure that places that are those safe spaces for kids, like music classes and theater classes, are also really explicit about their support for LGBTQ people. Saying this person was gay and a composer is life-saving. Saying that this person was gay and a mathematician is life-changing and life-saving for a lot of students. So being able to teach our teachers how to do that and how to incorporate more of that is, I think, really important.
One question that comes up about that, and I'm sure I don't teach in the secondary schools here in Texas, but I'm sure a lot of parents, especially in Texas, would have some sort of moral opposition to LGBTQ studies in schools. So, and I'm sure in Utah you would have the same thing. So how do you address that concern, which I think is a completely invalid concern, but how do you address that concern while trying to serve those students, if that question makes sense?
No, that's actually basically what my dissertation was. So it's a great question.
I'll read up on it.
Yeah, well, so several states have advocacy laws that say that you can't advocate homosexuality in the classroom. Utah actually just overturned theirs, but there are still some states that have that. Texas doesn't have that law in particular, but they do have, Texas is one of the largest states that still makes it legal to fire somebody for being gay, which is a problem and is really scary for teachers, right? Because talking about that issue might out them, and that can be terrifying. So what I would say is sharing important personal background on the people that you're talking about in your curriculum can help students relate to those people better and understand them better. So I would talk about important, influential, like African-American scientists and point out that they're African-American in the same way that I would talk about important, like LGBTQ historical figures in my classes and point out that as well. Talking about like Harvey Milk as within the context of the civil rights movement, I think should be considered, just part of a regular education, or pointing out like the contributions of, my goodness, why can't I think of his name? The computer scientist guy.
Alan Turing?
Thank you. Alan Turing, right? That should be important. And I think that you can work in his homosexuality as part of just like, I'm just telling you about this person. Right. We had a parent who got really upset a couple of years ago that we had rainbow flags displayed in some of our classrooms. And he said that it was promoting or advocating a certain lifestyle that he found offensive. And one of our teachers made this beautiful statement to the parent about why he thought that the parent was making a mistake. And he said, I teach Spanish and I have the Mexican flag hanging in my classroom. And I don't fly the Mexican flag because I'm promoting Mexico as the best Spanish-speaking country. But I fly this flag because I want to make sure that my students know that I support Mexicans and that I support Mexico as a country, because there have been so many negative statements made about it. And that's the same reason why I fly this rainbow flag in my classroom, because I want to make sure that my students know that they're supported and that I support them. And the parent was able to see that as a valid, educational act rather than, advocacy or activism. And so I think that, in Texas and in states like Utah as well, you do have to be careful. But in Utah, the number one cause of death for 11 to 17-year-olds is suicide. And that's not a rare statistic, unfortunately, nationwide. So you have to balance being yelled at by parents with the life of your students.
Wow.
Yeah, Texas actually had one of the North Carolina bathroom bill for transgender people going to the state Senate. And there was actually a Republican lawmaker that helped in shutting this bill down. And he said, I will not have the suicide of any Texan on my hands, meaning that these transgender youth are quite possibly the highest risk people for suicide. And by passing this bill, you would be basically encouraging their suicide by alienating them. So, yeah, that's a big deal now.
Wow. Alli, I don't know why this didn't, I should have put this in your bio. What is your title for Human Rights Campaign?
Oh, I'm on the Utah steering committee. So, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a big passion of yours. And so something I want to know, you mentioned the Mexican flag, and it made me think of like the ally flags or human rights campaign stickers. What do you say to people? And I guess this is just asking you as a person, maybe not so much as a vice principal, but someone says that ally sticker is offensive because my religion says you're not supposed to do that, so that's oppressing my religion. How do you respond to that?
That has happened. I've actually done like some professional developments for teachers on how to do this. And I had one teacher get very upset with me and say that I was like oppressing her religion. And I just said, I'm sorry that you feel that way. I'm not. That's
not what oppression means.
Right.
So it's so frustrating.
Completely disrespectful to those who have been oppressed.
Right. It's like, it's like they're misusing the word oppress. No, we are not oppressing you by doing that. That's anyway. Sorry. Continue, please.
No, I mean, I don't think that I don't know if there's a real intelligent answer to that, because I'm not sure that it's a real like intelligent complaint, I guess.
No. Yeah. It's infuriating.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I try to go back to the idea that the classroom doesn't need to be a place where you feel comfortable. It needs to be a place where your students feel comfortable. And, I have never forced somebody to hang a rainbow flag in their classroom or to put you are accepted here sign in their classroom. Kids are going to know that you are not accepting of them through your actions. So, that's one thing. I try to explain some of those symbols as like McGruff House signs. Casey, you're younger than I am. Do you remember McGruff House?
I know that term, but I don't know. Like no picture comes to mind.
So when I was in kindergarten, I used to walk to kindergarten and back home every day. And it was like, I don't know, like maybe 5 blocks or something, but it felt like it was like miles, to a kindergartner. And I would identify every house between our house and my kindergarten that had a McGruff House sign in it. And it was just this little sign with like this detective looking dog.
Right.
He was like holding a little magnifying glass. And that McGruff House sign was supposed to say, if you're scared or like a stranger's following you or somebody's trying to kidnap you, you can go to this house and that safe person lives there who will help you. And I don't know if it was an effective campaign. Like, I don't know if like they actually like vetted who these people were who hung these signs up and stuff. But I remember that I got a lot of comfort from just knowing like in 3 more houses, there's a McGruff House. And then in 2 more houses, there's another McGruff House. Huh. And I was never kidnapped as a child. Like nothing bad ever happened to me when I was walking to or from kindergarten. But I just remember like feeling secure knowing that those signs were up. And I think it's the same thing that we do in our classroom. Like when we hang a rainbow flag or we put up the Human Rights Campaign symbol, we're sending a message, a subtle message to people that I am a safe person. I will stand by you. This is a place where you can be accepted. And even if you never use that, like a student never comes out to you or makes use of that, sending that message out there is so important. And, if somebody feels that having that symbol up is somehow offensive to them or oppressive to them, I would just remind them that like nobody's telling them they can't wear their cross around their neck, on their necklace or something, and that it is merely a symbol of a feeling or a symbol of an ethical system that, legally I'm allowed to express.
Yeah.
Megan, you got another question for Alli?
Yeah, we have one more question from Micah Detweiler, and he's asking, I've seen many teachers get frustrated by administrators for various reasons, like lack of attention to their needs, seeming to prioritize other departments, etc. What don't teachers understand about the job administrators have to do?
Great question.
And then I just kind of wanted to tag on to that too. What Alli, what kind of influenced your decision to become an administrator?
I love this question because this was my first year as an administrator, and one of the things that influenced my decision was my frustration as a teacher with my administrators. So I definitely sympathize with why teachers are frustrated by administrators and how much it feels sometimes like administrators don't support you. Having done the job for 1 year, I can say that a lot of that frustration is probably legitimate. I know that there are things that I did not see some of my administrators doing, and I think that they should be. I mean, administrators get paid more than teachers, and they should be working harder than teachers and making teachers' jobs easier. And if they're not doing that, then they're not doing their jobs. But I will, if we have time, I have a metaphor for this. So being a administrator reminds me of the story of a person walking along the banks of a river, and they look in the river and they see a baby floating downstream toward them. And so they wade into the river and they rescue that baby, and they bring the baby up to the banks of the river. And as soon as they are sure that baby is safe, they turn around and another one is floating downstream. And so they go back into the river, they rescue that baby, and this cycle repeats over and over, and they're just constantly wading into that water and rescuing babies. A lot of times as a teacher and as an administrator, it feels like that's what you do. And some people use the metaphor of putting out fires. But I like this one better because truly it feels that important. Like you can't walk away from that. And yet at some point in time, somebody has to eventually walk upstream that river and find out who keeps throwing babies into it. Right?
Yeah.
That's the problem. And that's the thing that I think that sometimes teachers don't understand about the job of a good administrator will eventually begin to walk upstream, which means that sometimes they're going to ignore like the immediate problem, the baby's floating in the river, it is that hard sometimes to ignore, right? Like, yeah. I mean, it is that hard because these are real problems and I don't want to minimize them at all. But at some point in time, you do have to step away from the immediate problem and try to address the larger one, which is like why are babies being put into this river to begin with?
Yeah.
And so that's the one thing that I didn't understand about the job, and that throughout this year, I've been really struggling to try to balance that need to walk upstream with the need to stay in the river and do the work right then and there.
Well, I imagine you, with so much classroom teaching experience, you also are really inclined to fall back on your experience and say, oh, I know exactly how to fix this little problem for you. And you probably get your hands dirty right away, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's, dealing with some of those problems does become kind of second nature versus these bigger ones that, I struggle with that are going to impact the school as a whole.
Wow, very cool. Well, I just want to, it's about time to wrap this up, and I just thought I'd bring it back around to the little video that kind of sparked inviting Alli on. And as I looked up this Kirsten Westcott, I also found that in 2014, she was what's called a Golden Apple Award recipient. So just to be clear, this isn't a teacher who is just crying about their job being hard. And she has also been awarded with this this distinction. And they actually did this little news feature on local news, WLUK TV Fox 11. And you can see this little clip on YouTube. But man, she seems like a wonderful teacher, and they interview many of her students, and they say really, really wonderful things about her that you can listen to if you want. And I just want to close by asking Alli, how should the school board respond to what she brought them? Like, in an ideal world, what could they do? There are immediate things that I think could be done, and then there are bigger things that I would really love to see them do. Immediately, like she mentioned in that video that she's had 7 administrators in 6 years. That's absurd. I mean, if they can't find good people to go in there and do that job, then I agree with her. They need to be in there doing that job. I mean, the superintendent should be competent enough to go into that school and run that school if she needs to, or the deputy superintendent or whoever. And they need to be providing those teachers with some extra time and money to do the things like if those teachers need to teach
4 periods a day instead of 6 periods a day so that they have 2 more to like deal with their stress management or to, like meet as teams to support each other and stuff. Those are things that can be done immediately and certainly should not be barriers for a school district that prioritizes that. Bigger things that I would love to see a lot of school districts do is work on school boundaries. So often school boundaries are tied to property tax, like property rates and property values. As a result of that, even though I said at the beginning of this that 50% of public school students live in poverty, most schools don't have 50% of their students in poverty. They have like either 80% of their kids in poverty or 20% of their kids in poverty. And that's because the way that we draw our school boundaries are really inequitable. So my guess is that this school has a really high percentage of students in poverty, which is what my school does too. Whereas if they redrew those boundaries and made it so that it was 50% in this school and 50% in another school, they would probably decrease a lot of high need students that they're serving, right? And spread some of that out. That would not only benefit the teachers, but that would also benefit the kids. I mean, getting them, into a more regular kind of situation or like into a more stable environment is going to help them not escalate as well. And so that seems like something that, while it's a huge political undertaking and people won't be happy, that's an equitable thing to do that the school district could and probably should be doing.
Wow. Okay. Cool to know. My immediate reaction was just, well, I'm sure they would fix these things if they could, but if it's like problems I've encountered in my line of work, well, it's about space, time, and money and manpower, but maybe it's more optimistic than I thought. That's cool. Well, guys, I think it's time to wrap. Thanks so much for all y'all's questions. Ben, Laurel, and Megan, it's good to see you guys. And Alli, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Alli. It was like really great perspective.
Well.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, really appreciate it. And okay, guys, well, thanks. We'll catch you on episode 104. Okay, bye, everyone.